Married for 2 years, and I had never once set foot in the master bedroom. My husband finally couldn't take it anymore, shouting, "Is this all because I took my assistant to a spa on our wedding night instead of being with you?" I nodded coldly. He froze on the spot. "I have been married for 2 years, yet I have never once stepped inside the master bedroom. It sounds like a cruel joke, but it's a truth I carry every night, a small thorn embedded deep under my skin, never bleeding, just a dull, persistent ache. Tonight, the wall clock strikes 11. Our sprawling estate, perched on a hill in Marin County, is brightly lit, but as cold as a museum. Outside the window, the wind rustles through the coastal redwoods, the leaves whispering against each other like mocking jeers. I am sitting in the second-floor guest suite, which should have been just a spare room. Yet, for the past 2 years, it has become my only sanctuary in this house we call a marriage. I am sketching, not out of passion, but because only by keeping busy can I stop my mind from drifting back to fragments of the past. The warm yellow light casts down on the drafting table, illuminating the cool, soft lines of a wedding gown. I design wedding gowns for others, while my own has been packed away at the bottom of a cedar chest for a very long time. Downstairs, the front door opens and the heavy oak slams shut. The distinct click of expensive leather shoes on the marble floor echoes up, each step clear and decisive, carrying the scent of whiskey and high-end men's cologne. I know he's home. I don't need to look. My door is pushed open without a knock. He stands there, his tie loosened, his suit jacket slung over his arm. His face is still handsome in a way that would make outsiders envious, but all I see is exhaustion. His voice is hoarse from fatigue. "You're still awake, Ilara?" I don't turn around. I'm working. My reply is more suited for a roommate than a husband. He walks in, tosses his jacket onto the bed, and places a dark blue velvet box on my table, a 2-year anniversary gift. I'm late, so consider this making up for it. I glance at the box without opening it. "Thank you. Just leave it there." My silence irritates him. I can hear his ragged breathing, as if he's just run a long distance chasing something about to slip from his grasp. He leans his hands on the table, bending down to look at me. "Do you have any idea what day it is?" I canceled a multi-million-dollar meeting to come home. I put my pencil down and turned to face him. In the reflection of the window, my eyes are frighteningly calm. "So, what do you want from me? To be overjoyed, moved, to play the part of the dutiful wife, taking off your shoes and drawing you a warm bath?" He frowns. "Isn't that what a wife does?" I let out a soft laugh. "And what about your assistant? I thought she was the one you were accustomed to taking care of." Her name freezes the air between us. He becomes enraged. "You always bring that up. Hasn't it been 2 years? Isn't that enough? She's just a subordinate who helps me with work." I don't want to argue. I bend down to pick up my pencil. "If you only came here to fight, then please leave. I need quiet." He doesn't leave. He grabs my wrist, pulling me to my feet. His grip is so strong it makes me wince. "Enough. What is it you really want?" I look him straight in the eye. "I've told you, I feel dirty." Those 2 words are like an invisible slap. He's stunned. "Dirty? How am I dirty?" He scoffs, as if he's just discovered something utterly ridiculous. "Don't tell me you've held a grudge for 2 years just because I took my assistant for a massage to sober her up on our wedding night." The room falls silent. I nod. "Yes." At that moment, he looks as if he's been flash frozen. He never expected me to admit it so bluntly. To him, it was a small thing, an act of responsibility. To me, it was a choice to abandon his new bride on their wedding night to be with another woman. He adds, his voice sharp, "I've explained it countless times. Nothing happened. It was just a massage, a steam bath, waiting for her to sober up." I look at him, not crying, not smiling. "In your eyes, it's a small thing. In my eyes, it's a boundary." I walk to the door, opening it in a gesture of invitation. "Please leave. I want to rest." He slams his fist against the wall, his voice a low growl. "Fine, stay in this room for the rest of your life. I refuse to believe you can survive without me. He storms out, the door slamming shut, making the painting on the wall tremble. I bend down to pick up the velvet box he knocked over. Inside is a diamond necklace, glittering under the lamp. The style is not something I would ever wear. I know whose taste it reflects. Without hesitation, I throw it into the trash can. That night, I have the best sleep I've had in 2 years. The next morning, sunlight streams through the blinds, casting patterns on my face. My phone buzzes a text from my lawyer and my best friend. The file is ready. I smile. 2 years is long enough for a heart to grow cold, and long enough for me to prepare for a proper ending. 2 years ago, I sat in that master bedroom, wearing my wedding gown, waiting for him. Rose petals were scattered across the bed, the word forever in elegant script everywhere. His phone rang. He answered, his expression changing. I asked him what was wrong. He said his assistant was drunk, with no one to take her home, and she needed to sober up in a spa. I said, "It's our wedding night." He told me not to be childish, that he'd go and be back soon. I waited until morning. That morning, I took off my wedding gown, folded it neatly, and stored it away. I moved into the guest suite. From that day on, I never set foot in the master bedroom again. It wasn't to make a scene, but because I had buried my love in there. 2 years later, I decided it was time to end the funeral, and my story, my real story, begins now. The story and characters above are a work of my own creation, entirely fictional. It is not a true story. The MC voice in the original story is AI generated. The positive takeaways an audience can get from this story are to learn to cherish oneself, understand that marriage requires respect and making the right choices, know when to let go of relationships that cause pain, have the courage to stand up when taken for granted, patiently build personal value, and believe that true happiness comes from living in alignment with one's self-respect and emotions. I didn't move to the guest suite in a fit of rage. There were no suitcases thrown, no tears, and certainly no dramatic midnight scene. I simply, quietly, picked up my pillow, opened the door to the room at the end of the hall, locked it, and lay down. That door closed so softly, but inside me, something had slammed shut. I understood clearly. The moment he left our home on our wedding night to be with another woman, my marriage was stillborn. It was just that no one had held the funeral yet. The next morning, he returned long after I was awake. I heard his car in the driveway, the familiar sound of his shoes on the stairs. He stood before the guest suite door, hesitating for a few seconds before knocking lightly. "Are you awake?" I opened the door, my face as calm as if nothing had happened the night before. "You're back." His eyes swept over the small room, landing on my unpacked suitcase and the pillow on the bed. He frowned. "You slept here?" "Yes. Why not in the master bedroom?" I looked at him for a few seconds before replying, "I'm more used to this space." He said nothing more. Perhaps he thought I was angry, sulking, waiting for him to coax me. He didn't know that inside me, everything had gone as still as frozen water. I made coffee and breakfast as usual. He offered a few perfunctory apologies, explaining that last night was an emergency, that his assistant had been frail since childhood, that he couldn't just leave her. I listened, nodding, not arguing. My calm composure relieved him. He believed the matter was closed. But for me, it was the beginning of a long 2 years. From that day on, I maintained a careful distance. I still appeared at family gatherings, smiled at the right moments, and played the part of the graceful wife in front of outsiders. But when night fell, I returned to the guest suite, locked the door, and lived my own life. I never asked where he was going, never checked his phone, never monitored his schedule. Not because I trusted him, but because I no longer had any interest in knowing. He gradually grew accustomed to me not entering the master bedroom. At first, he asked a few times, "Don't you find this inconvenient?" I'd reply, "No." "Are you still angry about what happened?" "No." My answer was always no. That placidness reassured him. He thought I had accepted it, gotten used to it, had resigned myself to it. He didn't know that every night, I asked myself, if I were to step into that bedroom, Could I sleep peacefully on the bed that had been meant to welcome another woman on my wedding night? I couldn't. During those 2 years, I didn't let myself drown in sorrow. I threw myself into my work. During the day, I was at my design studio. At night, I sketched until the early hours. I used exhaustion to fill the voids in my heart. There were nights I sat alone by the window, looking at the city lights sprawling below the hills, wondering what I was doing in this marriage. But whenever the thought of leaving sparked, I would ask myself, if I leave, what do I have? The answer always silenced me. I understood my position. I held the title of Mrs. Ethan Vance, the wife of a successful man, but everything around me was attached to his name. If I left empty-handed, I would just be a footnote, a bitter ex-wife who wasn't forgiving enough. I didn't want to become a topic for others' judgment, and I certainly didn't want him to use his money and power to define my worth. So, I chose to stay not for love, but for preparation. During those 2 years, I built my own brand. I met with partners myself, convinced clients myself, and shouldered the risks myself. I never used my status as his wife to ask for any special favors. Every contract I signed bore my name. Every small success I achieved was a brick, silently laid on my own path to freedom. He didn't notice. He was busy with his projects, his social galas, and his assistant who was always there at the right time. She was clever, gentle, and a good listener. She knew his schedule better than I did. Gradually, everyone around us grew accustomed to that image. They called me Mrs. Vance, and they called her his trusted aide. I heard the whispers, but I didn't react. I refused to turn myself into a cheap, jealous wife. Once, at a family dinner, his mother asked, "How are you two doing lately?" He smiled and answered for me, "We're doing great, Mom. Just busy with our own work." I smiled along. Yes, no one asked further. No one cared where I slept. For them, as long as the facade was peaceful, it was enough. That night, I returned to the guest suite and sat in the dark for a long time. I realized that in his eyes and his family's, I just needed to exist in my designated place. My feelings were irrelevant. They didn't need me to be happy, they just needed me not to cause trouble. From then on, I became even more clear-headed. I started documenting everything not for revenge, but to understand exactly where I stood. I noted the nights he didn't come home, the times his assistant appeared a little too conveniently, the moments I was forgotten in my own marriage. I didn't use these notes to start a war. I used them to remind myself never to forget. Sometimes he would come home very late, the scent of a strange perfume lingering on his shirt. He would lie in the master bedroom bed, while I was in the guest suite, separated only by a wall but worlds apart. I would hear him call out, "Are you asleep?" I'd call back, "Yes." "Can you come in here and talk for a bit? Let's do it another time." He would fall silent. I knew he wasn't used to being rejected, but I also knew that if I walked in there, I would lose the last thing I had left, my self-respect. 2 years passed, both quickly and slowly. On the outside, everyone thought I was a content, accommodating wife. On the inside, I was dismantling the ties that bound me. Day by day, I no longer waited for him to come home, no longer hoped he would change. I was only waiting for the day I was strong enough to leave without a single glance back. By the time he realized the distance between us was no longer silence, but an insurmountable wall, it was too late. But that was a story for later. For now, I remained in the guest suite, continuing my role as the placid wife, waiting for the right moment to end this long-running play called marriage. The distance between Ethan and me didn't come from a single, massive fight, but from the accumulation of very small details. So small that if one weren't paying attention, they'd be missed. For example, the fact that he no longer remembered I drink my coffee black, no sugar. For example, the fact that my birthday passed in silence, while just a week later, he ordered a huge cake for his assistant's birthday at the office. I knew about it not because I was snooping, but because her name, Chloe, appeared so frequently on his phone screen, even when he was sitting right across from me. I didn't ask. I didn't need an answer. Each time, another line was etched in my heart. marking a crack that could never be repaired. One evening, in a rare instance, he came home early. I was eating dinner alone in the kitchen. He sat down opposite me, watching me for a long time. "You talk less than you used to." I picked up a piece of broccoli. "What do you want me to say?" "I just feel you're distant." I looked up, meeting his eyes directly. "Distance isn't something I decide on my own." He fell silent. The silence stretched until I could hear the clock ticking on the wall. Finally, he stood up, said he had work to handle, and left. That dinner grew cold, just like every other dinner for the past 2 years. I began to realize that it wasn't just me who had changed. He had too. He was more irritable, more impatient. He was no longer certain that I would always be there waiting for him as I had before. Some nights, he would stand outside the guest suite door for a long time, but ultimately return to the master bedroom. I heard the door close and knew that he was confused too. He just didn't know how to admit it. Meanwhile, Chloe's presence became increasingly conspicuous. She appeared in all his stories under the guise of work. The company had an event today. She helped me manage it. She's been following this project from the start, so I brought her along. At first, he offered these explanations with a hint of guilt, but they gradually became matter of fact. I would listen, nod, and not react. My indifference was both a relief and an annoyance to him. A relief because he didn't have to face tears or accusations. An annoyance because he no longer felt as important as he once did. Once, at a partner's gala, I ran into her. She wore a simple but elegant dress, standing beside him with a natural ease. When she saw me, she smiled and nodded her head. "Good evening, Mrs. Vance." I returned the gesture with a polite smile. "Hello." There was nothing extraordinary about the moment, but I could clearly see the eyes of those around us. They were curious, comparing, and silently judging. I wasn't angry at her. I just found it amusing. A truly intelligent woman wouldn't need to stand next to another woman's husband to prove her worth. That night, on the way home, he asked me, "Did that bother you?" "What bother me?" "Her." "Chloe." I looked out the car window, where the streetlights blurred past like the thoughts in my head. "If I said yes, what would you do?" He was silent for a long time. "I'd be more careful." I turned to look at him and smiled. "Is that all?" My response confused him, but it was that very confusion that made him uneasy. I continued with my work, which became increasingly busy. My design studio started landing major clients. I traveled for business more often, came home later. Some nights, I didn't return to the estate at all, sleeping at the studio instead. He would text, "Not coming home?" "No." "When will you be back?" "Not sure." Those short, clipped messages made him slowly realize I no longer revolved around his schedule. One morning, I received a call from his mother. Her voice was gentle but carried its usual scrutinizing tone. "You've been very busy lately, dear. You haven't been home much." "Yes, my work has been demanding." A woman should also think about her family. I smiled, though she couldn't see it. "Yes, I'm always thinking." The conversation ended amicably, but I knew that in her eyes, I was no longer the ideal wife. I wasn't sad. I was used to not pleasing others. That evening, he came home earlier than usual. He stood in the guest suite, looking around as if realizing for the first time that this was also my living space. "Are you planning to stay in here forever? Until it feels appropriate." "Appropriate for what?" I looked at him, my voice even. "Appropriate for me." He gave a forced laugh. "You always say things that leave people speechless." "Because I'm not speaking to make you comfortable." For the first time, I saw clear frustration and helplessness in his eyes. He wasn't used to not being in control of someone else's emotions. He was used to everything, including his marriage, operating according to his will. I realized that my quiet existence, neither causing a scene nor submitting, was what bothered him the most. That night, he knocked on my door. "Let's talk." I opened it. He asked, "Do you still love me?" The question came 2 years too late. I looked at him for a long time. In that moment, I saw the anxiety in his eyes, not born of love, but of the fear of loss. "I don't know." My honest answer stunned him. You don't know? No. I'm no longer sure what my feelings are. He was about to say something but ended up just sighing. I thought you were just angry. I shook my head. No, I'm just awake. After that night, he started paying more attention to me. He asked about my work, whether I was tired, if I needed anything. These belated gestures of concern, had they come sooner, might have moved me. But now they felt like clumsy patches trying to cover a hole that was far too large. I knew my change had unsettled him, but he still didn't understand. Being unsettled is not the same as being remorseful. And when a man only begins to fear loss when the other person has stopped waiting, all efforts become meaningless. 2 years in the guest suite had taught me one thing. Silence is not for enduring, but for observing. And I had observed long enough. These signs, whether he intended them or not, were leading us to a point of no return. I wasn't in a hurry. I knew the true climax of this story was still ahead. I began to realize the boundary between Ethan and me was no longer blurred. It had taken a clear, sharp form, like the edge of a blade. It didn't need to draw blood. Its mere existence was enough to make one bleed from the inside. It all started on an evening that seemed perfectly ordinary, an evening that, 2 years ago, I wouldn't have even noticed. I came home late that day, exhausted after a full day of meetings with partners. When I opened the door, I saw the lights in the guest suite were on. He was sitting there not in the master bedroom, but on the sofa in my space. On the coffee table in front of him were 2 glasses of red wine, already poured. The scene made me pause for a few seconds, as if I had walked into the wrong set. "You're back." He looked up and nodded. "Yes, I was waiting for you." I put my bag down but didn't sit. "What do you need?" "Nothing. I just wanted to talk." I glanced at the 2 wine glasses. "You can drink. I'm tired." He gestured to the empty chair. "Just for a little while." Not wanting to argue, I sat down but didn't touch my glass. He was silent for a long time, as if arranging his thoughts. "I know I haven't been making you happy lately." I looked at him without responding. "I also know you're not the same as you were before. You've changed. Everyone changes. But you changed because of me." I smiled faintly. "No, I changed for me." That statement made him freeze. I saw a flicker of annoyance in his eyes. He wasn't used to hearing answers that didn't revolve around him. "Don't you ever think about my feelings?" "I thought about them for 2 years. What about you? Have you ever thought about the pressure I'm under?" I looked him straight in the eye. "Does your pressure include taking your assistant with you on your wedding night?" The air turned to ice. He slammed his glass down on the table. "You're bringing that up again." "Because it never ended." I apologized. "Did you apologize because you were annoyed, or because you understood you were wrong?" He didn't answer. That silence was an answer in itself. I stood up. "If there's nothing else, I'd like to rest." "How long are you going to keep avoiding this?" "I'm not avoiding it. I just no longer feel the need to explain." He stood up too, stepping closer to me. "You're my wife. We can't keep going on like this. So what do you want? At least try to live like a married couple." I looked at him, my voice slow. "Being a married couple is more than just living in the same house." He reached for my hand. This time, I pulled it away. "Don't. Do you hate me that much?" "I don't hate you. I just don't want to touch you anymore." For the first time, I saw not just anger in his eyes, but panic. He was not accustomed to a woman who once loved him with all her youth so calmly stating such a thing. He dropped his hand, taking half a step back. "What are you planning to do?" "I'm living my life, while still carrying my name. That name is something you hollowed out a long time ago." He let out a sharp, bitter laugh. "You think you can just walk away so easily?" "I never thought leaving would be easy. Then why do you still want to?" I looked at him for a long time. "Because staying is even harder." That conversation ended without a sound, no argument, no reconciliation. But after that night, he began to change noticeably. He came home earlier, asked what I wanted for dinner, if I was tired. These small, fragmented gestures of care, had they come at a different time, might have softened my heart. But now they were like misplaced bricks, unable to patch a wall that had already cracked. I knew he was starting to worry not about losing love, but about losing control. I no longer waited for him, no longer asked about him, no longer made him the center of my decisions. That unsettled him more than any jealous fit ever could. Meanwhile, Chloe started appearing before me more often, no longer just a name in his stories. One afternoon, as I was leaving my studio, I found her standing at the gate, holding a file. She looked at me, her smile a bit strained. "Heading home, Mrs. Vance? Is there something I can help you with?" "I came to see Ethan, but he's not back yet. I don't keep his schedule." She gave a faint smile. "I know. It's just, he's been mentioning you a lot lately." I looked at her. "Mentioning what?" "He says you're busy, you're tired, that you don't like to be disturbed. Then you should listen to him." She was silent for a few seconds, then said unexpectedly, "Aren't you afraid?" "Afraid of what?" "Of losing him." I laughed out loud. I lost him a long time ago. She looked at me, unconcealed surprise in her eyes. Perhaps she was used to the image of wives who were afraid of losing their husbands, who clung, who grew jealous. My answer was not in her script. "You're strange." "Perhaps, but he's not what you think he is." "I'm not thinking anything at all." I walked away, leaving her standing there. For the first time, I realized it wasn't just him, but she too was becoming insecure. When a woman no longer fights, no longer tries to prove a point, her very silence becomes the thing that frightens others the most. That night, he came home very late. I didn't go out to ask, but he came to my room on his own. "You saw Chloe today." "Yes." "What did she say to you?" "Nothing important." "You're not mad, are you?" I looked at him and asked back, "Are you worried that I'm mad? Or that she's uncomfortable?" He couldn't answer. In that moment, I knew the boundary between us had shattered. It was no longer about the guest suite or the master bedroom. It was about a truth no one wanted to confront. I was no longer standing inside this marriage as someone who waits. I was standing outside, watching it collapse on its own. And I knew the hardest part was no longer the decision to leave, but the timing. I needed the right moment for everything to end cleanly, leaving no one with a reason to say I was wrong. 2 years of endurance were not for the sake of a messy breakup. I wanted to leave with my head held high. That night, I sat alone in the dark for a long time, not turning on the lights. I understood this story had reached a point of no return. The final boundaries had broken, and when boundaries break, the climax is only a matter of time. Our 2-year anniversary arrived quietly. No flowers, no candles, not a single official reminder from him. I remembered the date not because I was expecting anything, but because it was like a preset milestone in my mind, a point where I forced myself to look back at the entire path I had walked to ensure I had no regrets. That morning, I woke up earlier than usual, not out of excitement, but because I wanted to dedicate the entire day to my work. I left the house very early, before he even woke up. On the drive to the studio, I played music softly, letting the sound of the engine and my own breathing merge. I felt a strange sense of calm, like someone who has stood at the edge of a cliff for so long they've finally grown used to the wind blowing up from the abyss. The entire day, I barely left my drafting table. Every line I drew was decisive, without hesitation. I realized that when a woman is no longer held back by her emotions, her focus can be terrifying. In the afternoon, my assistant reminded me to leave early because it was a special day. I just smiled and said I still had work to do. I got home close to 11 p.m. The estate was still lit up. When I walked in, I saw him standing in the main living room, as if he had been waiting for a long time. His dress shirt was still crisp, his tie undone, and on the table was an unopened bottle of wine. He looked at me, his eyes somewhat scrutinizing. "You're late." "Yes. Do you know what day it is?" "I remember." He exhaled, as if relieved. "I bought you a gift." He pulled a dark blue velvet box from his jacket pocket. I looked at the box, feeling no sense of anticipation. I knew that what was inside no longer mattered. "Just leave it there." "You're not going to open it?" "I don't need to." My coldness made him frown. "You could at least take a look." I looked at him. Did you buy a gift because you wanted to make me happy, or because today is a day you're supposed to buy one?" He paused. "What's the difference?" "There is one," I replied softly. "One is an emotion, the other is an obligation." He was silent for a few seconds, then placed the box on the table. "I know you haven't been happy lately, but I've been trying. I didn't ask you to try." "Then what do you want?" "I want you to understand." "Understand what?" "That some things, once lost, can't be replaced with gifts." He laughed, a bit forced. "You talk as if I've committed some terrible crime." "No," I shook my head. "You just chose the wrong moment. You're still hung up on the past. Because for me, it was never the past." He slammed his hand on the table. "Do you have any idea how much pressure I'm under? The company, my family, expectations. I can't always revolve around your feelings." I looked at him, my voice calm. "I never asked you to revolve around me. I just needed you to be in your place on our wedding night. Just because of one night, because of one choice." The atmosphere grew heavy. He paced the living room for a few steps, then turned back. "You really can't let it go?" "I have let it go." "Let it go? And this is how you live?" "Letting go doesn't mean forgetting, and it certainly doesn't mean continuing." He looked at me as if I were a complete stranger. Perhaps he was realizing that the woman before him was no longer the girl from years ago, willing to compromise just to keep the peace. "You're pushing me away. I'm standing still. It's you who feels pushed. You think you'd be better off without me? I am living well." That answer silenced him for a long time. In the living room light, I could clearly see the insecurity on his face. It wasn't the fear of losing someone he loved, but the fear of losing something that had once belonged to him. "What are you going to do next?" "I don't need to say right now." "Where are you planning to go?" "I'm not going anywhere. I'm still here, but not with me. Here, until I don't need to be here anymore." He let out a soft, tired laugh. "You always say things that leave people speechless." "Because I no longer speak to please anyone." He looked at the velvet box on the table, then at me. "You're not opening the gift?" I walked over, picked up the box, and opened it. Inside was a glittering diamond necklace, its ornate design not my style at all. I nodded slightly. "It's beautiful. Do you like it?" "No." "Why?" "Because it's not for me." He frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" I put the box down, pushing it gently toward him. "This isn't my taste. You know that." He fell silent. Perhaps for the first time, he realized he hadn't understood me for a very long time. I stood up. "I'm tired. I'm going to my room. You're not staying to talk more? We've said more than enough." I walked up the stairs without looking back. That night, I didn't hear him follow. The guest suite door closed softly, but I knew that inside him, something had shattered. I sat on my bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling neither sad nor happy. I just saw, more clearly than ever, that this anniversary was the final nail in the coffin for any belated attempts at reconciliation. Downstairs, he stood by the small table for a long time, staring at the velvet box I had left behind. Perhaps in that moment, he finally began to understand that some gifts, no matter how expensive, could not buy back lost trust. But that realization came far too late, when I was no longer participating in this marriage with my emotions, but with my reason. And I knew that after this anniversary night, nothing could ever go back to the way it was. Everything that had been suppressed for 2 years was waiting for a chance to erupt. I was not in a hurry. I had waited long enough. The real climax was very near. After that anniversary night, the house became strangely silent. There were no more forced conversations, no more probing questions. He left early and came back late. So did I. 2 people living under the same roof, but our schedules were like parallel lines, no longer trying to intersect. I wasn't sad. I just felt that everything was moving in its natural direction, like water flowing downhill. One evening, I returned when the clock had passed midnight. It was raining, a steady downpour that blurred the lights outside the gate. As I stepped into the foyer, I heard a voice coming from his study. The door was slightly ajar, His voice was low and urgent, carrying an emotion I hadn't heard him use with me in a very long time. "Don't worry. I'll handle it." I stopped, not out of curiosity, but because the way he said "you" made me pause instinctively. "It's okay. I'll stay a little longer." A pause. Then he continued, his voice softening. "Yeah, I know. Listen to me." I didn't need to hear more to guess who was on the other end of the line. That name was no longer foreign to me, though I rarely spoke it. I walked softly up the stairs, making no noise, but just as I reached the top step, the study door opened. He stood there, phone still in hand. His eyes met mine, and he flinched. "You're not asleep yet? I just got back." "It's raining. Why didn't you let me know?" I glanced at the phone in his hand. "You were busy." He reflexively turned off the screen and put the phone in his pocket. "It was just work." I didn't ask. My reply made him pause. He looked at me for a moment, as if weighing his words, then said, "She's in a bit of trouble." "Okay. Don't you want to know?" No. For the first time, I saw him flustered by my indifference. He was used to my silence as a form of endurance, not as a sign of disinterest. "You've really changed." I gave a faint smile. "You're just now noticing?" He followed me towards the guest suite. "I just want to say, things aren't what you think. You don't need to explain, but I want to." I turned to face him. "Do you want me to understand, or do you want to ease your own conscience?" He couldn't answer. I went into my room and locked the door. That night, I slept deeply. No dreams, no tossing and turning. I realized that when a woman no longer invests her emotions in another person's actions, her mind becomes surprisingly peaceful. In the following days, that name appeared more frequently, not through his words, but through small details. A strange jacket in the car, a scent of perfume that wasn't mine, a phone call hastily ended when I walked into the room. I saw it all but asked nothing. I didn't need evidence to accuse anyone. I just needed enough clarity to know what I had to do. One afternoon, while I was at the studio, she showed up, unannounced, unscheduled. She stood at the door, looking tired, her makeup faint, a stark contrast to her usual confident demeanor. "Can I talk to you for a moment?" I looked at her for a few seconds, then nodded. "Come in." We sat opposite each other in my spacious, bright design studio. She looked around, surprise evident in her eyes. "I didn't think you worked here." "I've been working here for 2 years." He never said. I never asked him to. She fell silent, then gave a forced smile. "You're calmer than I expected." "I have nothing to be stressed about." "Aren't you afraid of losing him?" I looked at her for a long time. "I don't own him, but you're his wife. That title doesn't give me the right to control another person's feelings." She lowered her head, her voice softening. "I didn't mean for this to happen. I'm not interested in intentions. I was just there for him when he needed someone." I nodded. "Good for you. You don't blame me?" "I have no reason to." My composure flustered her. She had probably come here expecting a confrontation, an apology, or a chance to assert her position. But I gave her no role in my story. "You're really not going to fight for him?" I smiled. "I don't hold on to people who want to leave." She stood up, her expression complex. "You're stronger than I thought." "No," I replied. "I'm just done fighting." After she left, I sat for a long time, not thinking about him or her, but confirming one thing. I had reached a point where the appearance of a third person no longer caused me pain. When the pain is gone, the attachment naturally breaks. That evening, he came home early. He was waiting for me in the living room. "You saw Chloe." "Yes." "What did she say to you?" "Nothing important. You're not angry." I looked at him, my voice steady. "What are you worried about? Are you worried I'll misunderstand?" "Misunderstand what?" That he paused, unable to finish. I finished for him. "That you've chosen her." He was silent. "I understood that a long time ago." He stepped forward and took my hand. This time I didn't pull away immediately, but I didn't hold it back either. "Give me some time. I've given you 2 years. Just a little more." "How much longer?" He couldn't answer. I gently withdrew my hand. Stop calling someone else's name in the dark. He looked at me, his eyes wide with shock. You heard? I didn't need to hear. I could feel it. In that moment, I knew the truth was out, even if no one had said it directly. And when the truth is revealed, all denials become futile. I was no longer standing in this marriage as someone who waits or forgives. I was standing as someone about to leave, calm and clear-headed. That night, I opened my laptop and reviewed the documents I had been preparing for so long. Everything was ready. I felt no fear, no regret. I just felt light, like someone who has finally set down a long-packed suitcase right by the door. The name called out in the darkness had ended all my hesitation. And I knew the next chapter of this story would no longer be about silence, but about confrontation. The gala took place on a weekend evening, held at a grand hotel in downtown San Francisco. I knew about it not because he invited me, but because the invitation was sent directly to my design studio, addressed to me as a business partner. On the gold-embossed card, my company's name was printed formally, but in the space for a guest, there was no Mrs. Vance, only my name, stark and independent. I stared at the invitation for a long time, feeling neither sadness nor anger. I just saw my position in his world with greater clarity. That evening, I chose a simple black dress, not too flashy, nor trying to fade into the background. I wasn't trying to prove a point, I just wanted to show up as myself. When I entered the ballroom, the chandeliers cast a brilliant light, soft music played, and familiar faces turned to look. Some nodded in greeting, some looked surprised, others appeared awkward. I realized my presence was not part of their expectations. He was standing in the center of the room, talking to a partner. Beside him was Chloe, his assistant, wearing a pale beige dress, holding a glass of wine, the picture of a graceful companion. When he saw me, his eyes froze for a split second, but it was enough for me to notice. She followed his gaze and then turned to look at me. The smile on her lips faltered. I walked over, greeted the business partner first, and then looked at him. You're here early. Yes. Are you hosting this? No. A partner is. I nodded. I'm here as a guest. He pursed his lips as if wanting to say something, but in the end, just nodded. Right. She stood beside him and smiled faintly. I didn't know you were coming, Mrs. Vance. Yes. I wasn't aware you were a partner. There's a lot you don't know. The air between the three of us wasn't tense, but it was heavy in its own way. I didn't stay long. I excused myself and moved to another group. I talked, smiled, exchanged business cards. I didn't look his way again. I didn't want my gaze to become evidence of anything. A while later, I heard whispers behind me. Aren't they here together? But they're married. Who's that other woman? I heard them but didn't turn around. I understood that at events like this, other people's stories are always a tempting side dish. I had no obligation to explain. He found me as the party was winding down. I was standing on the balcony, looking down at the stream of cars below. You didn't tell me you were coming. You didn't tell me you were bringing her. He was silent. Are you doing this on purpose? I'm not doing anything on purpose. I'm just not hiding anymore. What do you want people to think? I can't control what other people think, but they'll misunderstand. I turned to face him. What are you afraid of? Are you afraid? He paused. Are you afraid they'll think we're not okay? I smiled very faintly. We haven't been okay for a long time. He sighed. You're making things difficult for me. It's not my job to make you comfortable. You're pushing things too far. No. I'm just done covering things up. A long silence stretched between us, the music from the ballroom a distant echo. You can go home first. That was my plan. As I turned to leave, he called my name. Aren't you going to introduce yourself as my wife? I stopped, without turning back. I don't think that's necessary. I left the party before him. On the way home, I felt an emptiness inside, but not the kind that frightens. It was the feeling an actor has when a play is over and the mask finally comes off. I knew that tonight, not just outsiders, but he too, was beginning to understand something. I was no longer standing behind him. I had stepped into the light under my own name. The next day, I received a call from his mother. Her voice was no longer gentle. What was the meaning of your behavior last night? What behavior, Mother? You attended that party as a business partner. I am his wife. Yes. So why weren't you standing by his side? I was silent for a few seconds. Because that is not my place. She took a sharp breath. You're causing a scene. I'm just living honestly. A woman should know her place. I knew my place for 2 years. The call ended on a sour note. I wasn't upset. I understood that when a woman steps out of the mold, she is always seen as a troublemaker. But I was no longer afraid of that. That night, he came home very late. He said nothing. Neither did I. We passed each other in the hallway like two strangers. He stopped at the door of my guest suite. How long are you going to keep this up? Until I don't have to anymore. You're forcing me to choose. No. I looked at him. You already made your choice. A long time ago. He stood there for a long time, not going into the master bedroom, not moving on. I closed my door and locked it. In the darkness, I leaned against the door and took a deep breath. I knew that after this party, things had passed the point of no return. The looks, the whispers, the silences between us, they were all pushing the story towards its climax. And I was ready. After the party, the house was no longer quiet in a cold way, but in a way that smelled of an approaching storm. I could feel it clearly. No words were needed, no more proof was necessary. The silences between Ethan and me had changed their nature. It was no longer the silence of endurance, but the silence of two people standing on opposite sides of a battlefield, waiting for the other to make a move. He started coming home earlier, but he didn't go to the master bedroom. He would sit in the living room, my space, as if trying to reclaim something he had lost. I didn't ask. I continued my routine as before. I cooked when I needed to, went to my room when I was tired. We ran into each other more often, but each time his gaze would linger on me longer than usual, filled with scrutiny and suppressed frustration. One evening, as I stepped out of the bathroom, he was standing there, blocking the doorway to my room. We need to talk. Go ahead. Not here. Then some other time. He grabbed my arm, not forcefully, but with determination. No. Now. I looked down at his hand on my wrist, then up at his face. Let go. How long are you going to run from this? I'm not running. Then face it. I am facing it. He pulled me over to the sofa. I didn't resist, nor did I comply. I just sat there, my back straight, my expression calm. What do you want? I've already told you. Do you want to hear it again? I want you to admit it. Admit what? That you chose someone else on our wedding night. I didn't choose. I left because of the situation. Because of her. The air grew thick. He leaned back on the sofa, rubbing his face. Do you know what I hate most about you? No. You're always so calm, as if I don't matter anymore. I looked at him. Because you are no longer the center of my life. What is that supposed to mean? It means I no longer revolve around you. He laughed. But it was a joyless sound. You think what you're doing is right. It's right for me. And what about this marriage? This marriage ended a long time ago. That's only what you think. I shook my head. You're just the only one who hasn't dared to think it. He shot to his feet. Don't pin all the blame on me. I'm not. So you think you're innocent? I think I've suffered enough. He stared at me. You want a divorce? The question landed in the middle of the living room, ringing out clearly. I'm not avoiding it. What? Say it again. I want a divorce. He froze. 1 second, 2 seconds, then he burst out laughing. Just because of one night, because of one choice. That's ridiculous. Maybe. I stood up. But I'm serious. He blocked my path. I won't agree. I don't need your agreement. You think the law is on your side? I've done my research. When did you start preparing? 2 years ago. You've been calculating. I've been saving myself. He was silent for a very long time. When he spoke again, his voice was lower. She can't replace you. I'm not comparing. I can end things with her. I'm not waiting. You're not giving me a chance. I already did. He stepped closer, his voice dropping. Do you really not love me anymore? I looked at him, for the first time not dodging the question. You have no idea how much I loved you, but I don't anymore. That truth was like a knife to his pride. He stepped back, leaning against the wall. How do you plan to leave? I'll tell you when the time comes. Are you trying to humiliate me? That's not my intention, but you already have. That's the consequence of your choices. He closed his eyes and sighed. You've changed so much. No, I replied. I just stopped playing the part of the easy wife. The conversation ended in a stalemate. No one yielded, no one cried, no one apologized. But I knew from the moment he uttered the word divorce, everything had crossed the final line. He could deny it, he could resist it, but the seed had been planted, and it would grow very quickly. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my room, my laptop open, reviewing every document, contract, account statement, property title. Everything was clear. I wasn't hiding anything. I was just prepared. Outside, the city was still bright, the cars still moved. The world didn't stop for my marriage. The next morning, I left the house very early. As I closed the door, I heard him call my name from behind me. But I didn't turn back. Not because I was cruel, but because I knew if I turned back now, I'd be pulled into the same old cycle. I needed to hold on to my clarity like a lifeline, thin but strong, leading me out of this place. I understood the hardest part wasn't saying the word divorce, but facing what came next. His family, public opinion, his resistance, the psychological games. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I had lived through 2 years of silence. No challenge ahead could be more terrifying than living beside someone whose heart was no longer there. The confrontation had happened, not with a bang, but with a clarity that severed all final illusions. And I knew the next chapter of this story would be action. No more retreating, no more waiting. After that night's confrontation, I knew I had officially entered the point of no return. If before everything was shrouded in silence, from the moment I said the word divorce, the machinery of family, reputation, and assets began to turn. It moved slowly, but heavily, and every rotation was designed to force me back. Ethan didn't speak another word to me for 2 days. He still came home, still ate, still slept in the master bedroom as if nothing had happened. But I understood this wasn't calm, it was preparation. He was a man accustomed to control, to holding the upper hand. When he was silent, it meant he was calculating. As I predicted, the first blow didn't come from him, but from his mother. That morning, I was at my studio when the receptionist told me I had a visitor. When I walked out, I saw her sitting ramrod straight on the sofa, impeccably dressed, her gaze sharp and cold. I wasn't surprised. I just let out a soft breath and walked over. Mother. She didn't reply immediately, just looked me up and down, as if appraising an object. Sit. I sat across from her. I hear you want a divorce. Yes, because of what happened 2 years ago, because of many things, but that was the root of it. Yes. She gave a faint, dismissive laugh. You're being childish, like all women. I remained silent. It's normal for a man in business to have connections on the outside. I can't accept that. If you can't accept it, you endure it. I have endured enough. She tapped her fingers on the armrest. Do you know what you stand to lose if you divorce him? Your reputation? Your status? The protection of this family? I have never had that protection. You live in a multi-million-dollar home. I don't need it. You are in a position that countless people dream of. It's not the position I chose. She stared at me. Do you think you're so capable that you can stand on your own in this society? I already am standing. That little design hobby of yours? That's your career? A woman over 30, divorced. What value do you think you'll have left? I looked her straight in the eye. My value is not determined by the opinions of others. She shot to her feet. You are truly ungrateful. I'm just being true to myself. This family will not accept a daughter-in-law like you. Then there's even less reason for me to stay. She suppressed her anger, lowering her voice. I'm giving you one piece of advice. Think carefully. This family doesn't let go easily, and it won't be easy for you to walk away." The meeting ended without shouting, but the pressure it left behind was immense. I understood that from now on, I was not just facing a husband, but an entire system. They would use every means possible: soft tactics, hard tactics, threats, and temptations. But what kept me calm was that I had been preparing for this day for 2 years. That afternoon, Ethan called me for the first time since our fight. "You spoke with my mother." I figured. "She's furious." I figured that too. "You don't have to make everything so tense." "I'm not the one making it tense. The truth is tense." "What do you want?" "An amicable divorce." "There will be nothing amicable about this." "Then we'll go to court." He was silent. "You really want to drag all of this into the papers?" "I don't. But you're forcing me." "No," I said slowly. "I am only withdrawing. You are the one who refuses to accept it." He lowered his voice. "I can give you more. I don't need money." "No? The house?" "No. Company shares." I paused for a beat. "You think I need those things to live?" "I think you'll regret this." "I have regretted enough already." He hung up. No goodbye, no threat. But I knew he had shifted from persuasion to confrontation. In the days that followed, I felt the invisible pressure closing in. A few business partners began to delay contracts. Some tactfully suggested I should stabilize my family life before expanding my projects. Others were more direct, saying they were hearing some unfavorable things. I understood the signal. They were testing me. I didn't react rashly. I focused entirely on my work. I perfected my new collection, adjusting every cut, every detail. I met with international partners, signing deals they couldn't interfere with. I needed to build a wall for myself, high enough before the real storm hit. One evening, while I was working late, he showed up at my office, unannounced, uninvited. He stood there, looking at me as if I were a stranger. "Are you really not afraid?" "Afraid of what?" "Of me. I used to be afraid. Not anymore." He walked closer, his voice low. "I never thought things would go this far. I've been thinking about it for a long time. Because of one night. Because you never understood how big of a deal that was." He clenched his fists. "I will not sign. I know you'll lose a lot. I'm prepared." He stared at me for a long time, his eyes a mixture of anger, helplessness, and a hint of confusion I had never seen before. "You've changed." "No," I replied. "I'm just not afraid of you anymore." He left without another word. I sat alone in my office, watching the city lights come on outside the window. The pressure was tightening, more tangible now, but strangely, I wasn't panicking. I felt like I was standing up straight for the first time in this marriage. I knew what came next wouldn't be words, but real blows: legal, reputational, financial. But I also knew that once I had come this far, I would not turn back. After he left my office that night, I knew one thing with absolute certainty: the phase of emotional negotiation was over. From now on, everything would be decided by black and white documents, by signatures, by clauses, by cold, hard numbers that left no room for regret or pleading. I was no longer the wife waiting in the guest suite. I was the plaintiff, the one choosing to end it. The next morning, I was at my lawyer's office early. The sky over San Francisco was overcast, the clouds low, the air heavy like the mood of someone about to enter a long battle. My lawyer was waiting, the files stacked neatly on his desk. He looked at me and gave a slight nod. "Are you ready?" "I am." "The other side won't make this easy." "I know. He has a powerful legal team." "So do we." "Then let's begin." The divorce petition was filed with the county court where we were married. As my pen left the paper, I felt a strange sensation. Not relief, as I had imagined, nor pain, as I had feared. It felt like the moment someone crosses a line between life and death, your heart is still beating, your hand is still trembling, but you know for certain there's no going back. That afternoon, I received a call from him. "You actually filed." "Yes." "You didn't give me any time to think. You had 2 years. You're being cruel." Cruel is abandoning your wife on your wedding night. You're still clinging to that. Because that's where everything began. He was silent for a long moment. Then his voice turned icy. Fine. I'll see you in court. Yes. I won't give an inch. Neither will I. The call ended abruptly. I put the phone down and looked out the window. The city was still busy, still noisy. No one knew that in a small office, a marriage was officially being placed on the scales of justice. In the following days, the news spread faster than I expected, not in the press, but in hushed conversations, in scrutinizing glances at business meetings. Some people called to check in, feigning concern but really trying to gauge if I was at a disadvantage. Others were more direct, advising me to back down to protect my image. I just listened and gave a wry smile. My image had been damaged 2 years ago. It was just that no one saw it then. The first mediation session took place a month later. I walked into the courthouse conference room with a calm demeanor. He was already there, sitting across the table with his lawyer. His face was still composed, impeccably dressed, carrying the air of a successful man used to controlling every situation. I looked at him, feeling neither love nor hate, just a cold, distant strangeness. The mediator began, his voice even and professional. Do both parties wish to reconcile? Ethan answered first. I do not consent to this divorce. I looked straight ahead. I am resolute in my request for a divorce. His lawyer immediately launched into familiar arguments. The marriage was free of violence. There was no official infidelity, no serious legal violations. He had always provided financially, fulfilling his economic duties. I listened without immediate rebuttal. When it was my turn, I said only one thing. This marriage no longer exists emotionally. The mediator asked, Do you have proof? Yes. I presented text messages, schedules, evidence of prolonged neglect, of the ambiguous but constant relationship between him and his assistant, not to prove infidelity, but to prove severe and sustained emotional damage. He looked at me, a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. Perhaps he hadn't expected me to be so thoroughly prepared. The mediation ended without resolution. The court noted both parties' positions and scheduled a hearing date. After the session, he cornered me in the hallway. How far are you planning to take this? Until it's over. Aren't you afraid of public opinion? I'm more afraid of living a lie. You think the court will side with you? I just need the court to acknowledge the truth. He gave a cold laugh. You really don't love me anymore. Correct. Then why are you still so angry? I'm not angry, I replied slowly. I just refuse to let you trivialize my pain. In the days that followed, the shadow war escalated. A few anonymous articles appeared on social media, alluding to an ambitious woman who used her marriage as a stepping stone, wanting to divide assets. I didn't react. I let my lawyers handle it. I understood it was their way of trying to make me lose my composure. But I was no longer the girl from years ago, easily swayed by gossip. I focused on my work, completing the biggest project of my career. Every finished design, every signed contract was another brick I laid in the foundation of my freedom. I needed to prove, not to them but to myself, that I could stand firm even without the title of his wife. One evening, I returned home to find him sitting in the living room, a stack of papers in front of him. I've reviewed it. Reviewed what? The divorce petition. And you still won't sign. That's up to me. But I have an offer. I'm not interested. I'll make financial concessions. I don't need them. You think you're that strong? I think I'm that clear-headed. He stood up, walking closer. You're pushing everything to a point of no return. No. I looked at him. I'm saving myself. He stared at me for a long time, then turned away. You will regret this. The only thing I regret is not doing this sooner. That night, I sat alone in my room, looking at the neatly packed boxes. I hadn't moved out yet, but I was ready. The legal battle had only just begun, and I knew the hardest parts were still ahead. But this time, I was no longer afraid. I had chosen this path, and I would see it through to the end. I didn't move out of the house immediately after filing for divorce. Not out of attachment, but because I understood one thing clearly. In this fight, the one who leaves first is often put in a weaker position. I needed to stand my ground, to occupy my rightful place, until everything was officially decided. That house was no longer a home but a silent battlefield where every step had to be calculated. Ethan changed noticeably after the first mediation. Gone were the clumsy attempts at reconciliation, the late-night calls. In their place was a deliberate, calculated coldness. He came home later, didn't eat at home, and some nights didn't come back at all. But I knew he wasn't giving up. He was just changing his strategy. One morning, as I was getting ready for work, I got a call from a longtime partner. "Elara, we're going to have to put the project on hold. May I ask why? We have some concerns about your personal situation." I was silent for a few seconds. "I understand." A second call, then a third, followed. No one said it directly, but I got the message loud and clear. They were using my reputation to suffocate me. Not loudly, not publicly, but just enough to cause trouble. I wasn't angry. I just found it ironic. 2 years ago, when I suffered in silence, no one cared. Now that I was standing up for myself, they called me unstable. That evening, he came home unusually early. He sat across from me at the dining table, watching me eat as if observing an opponent. "Are you tired yet?" "No. Your business is taking a hit. Not as much as you think. You really think you can win?" "I don't need to win against you." "Then what do you need?" "Freedom." He put his chopsticks down, his voice low. "Do you know what people are saying out there?" "I don't care. They're saying you're greedy." "Let them. They're saying you used our marriage." "And what do you think?" He stared at me for a long time. "I think you've changed." "You're mistaken," I replied. "I just stopped acting." The tension at the table was thick. "I can make things much worse for you." "I believe you can." "You believe me?" "I believe you will." My answer made him pause. Perhaps he was used to people cowering at his threats, but I was no longer afraid. I had already been through the worst living for 2 years beside someone whose heart had left long ago. A few days later, I received a file from my lawyer containing the documents Ethan's side had submitted to the court. They were trying to prove I had failed in my duties as a wife, that I had willfully lived separately and refused to cooperate in building a family. I read every line without surprise. They turned my silence into an excuse, my pain into my fault. I met with my lawyer that afternoon. "They're going to attack your character." I expected that. They want to drag this out. The longer it goes on, the more they expose themselves. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." I began to play the cards I had been holding for 2 years, not by going public, but by following the law. Evidence of his use of personal relationships within the company, ambiguous expenses, contracts showing clear conflicts of interest. I didn't want to destroy him, but I needed him to know I was not a pawn to be crushed. One night, he stormed into my room without knocking. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" "Protecting myself. You dare to investigate me. I'm only collecting facts. You want to ruin me. If you stop, everything will stop. Is that a threat?" I looked him straight in the eye. "It's a boundary." He looked at me as if I were a complete stranger. "I don't even recognize you anymore, because you never truly looked. You think you're so noble?" "I'm not noble. I'm just not a coward." That last word made him turn pale. He laughed, but it was a twisted, pained sound. "You're truly terrifying. I'm only terrifying to those who are used to looking down on me." After that, he never came to my room again. The house became unnaturally quiet. I knew he was reconsidering not his feelings, but the price he would have to pay. And when a man like him starts weighing the costs, it means the scales have shifted. The next court date was set. I walked into the courtroom feeling more steadfast than ever. Not because I was sure I would win, but because I was no longer afraid to lose. I had already won against myself the moment I dared to say the word divorce. When the judge asked again about each party's wishes, Ethan's response was slower than before. "I do not wish to divorce." I spoke immediately after. "I maintain my request." The judge nodded, taking notes. The air in the room was tense. I looked at him and saw the conflict in his eyes, not about losing me, but about losing control. And that's when I knew the mask was beginning to fall. This marriage wasn't just a love story, it was a confrontation between a man accustomed to power and a woman who had once endured. But endurance was not my nature. It was just a phase, and that phase was over. I walked out of the courtroom that day with a clear feeling. The road ahead was still long, with more clashes to come, but I was no longer standing alone in the dark. I was walking in the light, no matter how blinding that light might be. After that court hearing, I understood one thing clearly. Once the mask falls, a person accustomed to power no longer maintains their composure. They react instinctively, and Ethan's instinct was to control. Unable to control me, he would try to control everything around me. The pressure intensified, no longer probing but forceful. I started receiving anonymous calls, low, menacing voices that didn't threaten directly but were enough to make a weaker person lose sleep. I blocked the numbers. I didn't report them to the police because I knew they were just psychological jabs. Someone who truly intended harm wouldn't call first. One morning, as I arrived at the office, my accountant ran in, her face pale. "Elara, the company's bank accounts have been frozen." "On what grounds?" "There was an anonymous complaint about our cash flow." I nodded. "Call the lawyer." I had anticipated this move. It wasn't meant to convict me but to slow me down, to wear me out, to force me to lose focus. I signed the power of attorney, provided all the records. Everything was transparent. My company was clean. I had never engaged in shady business, and that was my shield now. That afternoon, he showed up. Unannounced. He didn't wait in the reception area but walked straight into my office as if it were still his domain. "What did you just do? What are you talking about? You know what I'm talking about." "I'm just working. Don't play dumb. You're the one who should stop." He leaned his hands on my desk, bending low. "You think these little games can scare me? No. I just want you to understand." "Understand what?" "That I am no longer someone you can suffocate." He gave a contemptuous laugh. "You've forgotten who you're dealing with." "I haven't forgotten. I'm just not afraid anymore." He stared at me for a long time. "You really want to push things this far?" "I'm not the one pushing. You did this to yourself." He straightened up, his voice dropping. "You are destroying everything." "No, I'm rebuilding." He walked out. The door slammed shut, but I didn't flinch. I knew this wasn't the final blow. This was just the frustration of a man used to winning, now having to learn how to accept a loss. In the following days, I barely had a moment's rest. By day, I managed my business. By night, I worked with my lawyers. Personal financial records, prenuptial assets, marital assets, every expense, every source of income. I wanted everything so clear that no one could distort it. I didn't want to win with tricks. I wanted to win with integrity. My family finally found out, not from me, but from the grapevine. My mother called, her voice trembling. "Are you really going through with this?" "Yes." "Have you thought about your future?" "I am thinking about it." "After a divorce, your life will be difficult." "More difficult than the last 2 years?" "Mom?" She was silent for a long time. "You're not wrong," she said softly, "but I'm worried you'll be exhausted. I've been exhausted enough." That was the first time in 2 years I felt completely supported by my own family. No judgment, no pressure, just acknowledgement. One evening, he called me, his voice hoarse. "I've been thinking." "About what?" "The divorce. You've had a change of heart?" "I have a condition. I'm not negotiating. Just listen first." "Go on." He took a deep breath. "I'll agree to the divorce." I was silent. "But not now." "Why?" "I need time." "Time for what?" "I need to stabilize things." "So do I." He lowered his voice. "Can you wait another year?" "No." "Why?" "Because I've waited long enough." He sighed. "You're giving me no way out." "No. I'm just not stepping back." The call ended. I knew he was starting to get scared. Not of losing me, but of losing his image, his power, the perfect facade he had built over the years. And when people get scared, they either let go or they fight back ferociously. The counterattack came sooner than I expected. One morning, A rumor appeared on a few gossip sites, vaguely writing about a young female entrepreneur who used marriage as a stepping stone. No names were mentioned, but everyone knew who it was about. I read it and closed the tab. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. My lawyer had a press release ready, but I chose to wait. I wanted to see how far they would go. That afternoon, I was summoned to meet with the authorities regarding the anonymous complaint. I went alone, without avoiding it. Everything proceeded by the book. After 3 hours, I walked out. There were no issues. The person who filed the complaint couldn't provide any evidence. My records were clean. When I exited the building, he was waiting there. "Are you okay?" "Fine. I didn't expect you to be this tough. You never understood me. I used to think you needed me. I used to think so too. Now I know I don't." He looked at me, his eyes empty. "You won." "No. I just stopped losing." He said nothing more. He turned and walked away, his steps slow, his shoulders slumped. I watched him go, feeling no triumph, no pity. I just saw a man who, for the first time, had lost control and didn't know who he was without it. That evening, I returned to the old house to pack my final belongings. I didn't cry. I just felt light. 2 years of endurance in exchange for this moment. I knew the final court date was approaching, and I knew that no matter the outcome, I was no longer the woman who walked out of the bedroom in silence. What is the price of control? It is the loneliness of having no one's trust, the fear when someone who once bowed suddenly stands tall, and he was finally paying that price. The final hearing fell on a morning of light rain. San Francisco was damp and gray, the sky so low I felt I could reach up and touch it. I arrived at the courthouse earlier than usual, not because I was nervous, but because I wanted a few moments of quiet before the courtroom doors opened. I sat on the cold wooden bench, breathing in and out slowly. 2 years of silence, over a year of preparation, all culminating in this one morning. He arrived 10 minutes after me, wearing the same familiar suit, walking with the same confident stride, but his steps were slower. I didn't turn to look. I didn't need to. I knew that in this moment, any glance would be superfluous. When the judge entered, the courtroom rose. The proceedings began, a monotonous reading of facts and figures that had been repeated in previous sessions. But this time was different. I could feel the atmosphere was no longer suspended. It was dense, as if every word carried weight. The judge asked one last time, "Do you maintain your request for divorce?" "Yes." "And you, sir, have you changed your position?" He was silent for a few seconds. I heard the rustle of paper, and then he said, "I consent." Those 2 words echoed. Not loudly, but enough to make the entire room pause. I closed my eyes for a brief moment, not to celebrate, not to grieve, but simply to confirm that I had just heard what I had been waiting for. His lawyer presented the settlement agreement. There were no unreasonable demands, no bitter disputes. The assets were divided according to the law. Most of what I owned before the marriage remained mine. I asked for nothing more, nor did I accept things I didn't need. I just wanted a clean end. When it was my turn to speak, the judge asked a deceptively simple question. "Do you have anything further to add?" I stood up. I didn't look at him. I looked straight ahead. I only hope that after today, we can each live according to our own choices, without blame, without lingering ties. He lifted his head. Our eyes met for a fleeting second. There was no more anger, no more contempt, just a vast emptiness. Perhaps we both understood we had reached the very end of this story. The judgment was pronounced, divorce granted. Those 2 words were no longer spoken in a living room, no longer a threat or a plea. They were a fact, sealed in red ink. I signed. He signed. No one said another word. As I stepped out of the courtroom, I felt a cool breeze on my neck. I pulled my coat tighter and walked slowly. It was over faster than I had imagined. No dramatic movie-like moments, no sobbing, just a very clear, very defined silence. He called my name in the hallway. "So, we're done." "Yes." "Do you hate me?" I thought for a few seconds. "No." "Really?" "I've hated enough." He nodded, a bitter smile on his face. "I thought you'd be happy. I feel light. Is there a difference? A huge difference. He said nothing more. He turned and walked away first, disappearing into the crowd. I stood for a moment, watching him go. Not with regret, but to close a chapter. I knew from this moment on, we would no longer share the same path. That afternoon, I returned to my studio. My staff looked at me, some hesitant, some smiling. I didn't explain. I just said one thing: everything's fine. Let's get back to work. Work consumed me. Meetings, designs, calls, one after another. I realized the world doesn't collapse because of a divorce. It keeps spinning, and if you don't fall down, it will carry you forward. That evening, I went back to my new apartment. It wasn't large or luxurious, but it was mine. I placed the last suitcase in a corner and sat down on the empty floor. No tables, no chairs, no curtains, just me and the sound of my own breathing. I laughed. For the first time in a long time, I laughed out loud. Not out of victory, but because I had made it through. I remembered that wedding night, sitting alone in that grand bedroom, listening to the wind outside, waiting for someone who had chosen to be elsewhere. I remembered the feeling of emptiness, of being left behind. If I could go back and tell that girl one thing, I would say, "You're going to be okay." But it's going to take a very long time. My phone buzzed. A text from my mom. "Is it done, sweetie?" "Yes. Mom's waiting for you to come home for dinner. I'll be there this weekend." "Okay. Just as long as you come home." I put the phone down. Outside the window, the rain had stopped. The streetlights glistened on the wet pavement. I opened the balcony door and took a deep breath. The air smelled of damp earth, of petrichor, of a very real freedom. I knew the life ahead wouldn't be all sunshine. There would be days I'd be tired, moments I'd doubt myself. But I also knew I would never go back to that guest suite, never again accept living as a shadow. The final hearing was over. It wasn't just the end of a marriage, but the beginning of a different life. A life where I am solely responsible for my own happiness. I stood in the middle of the empty room, thinking about tomorrow. No more title of someone's wife, no more role to play, just me and my choices. And this time, I chose to move forward. Life after the divorce didn't arrive with a thunderclap, but with a quiet stillness. So quiet that for the first few days, I still subconsciously listened for the sound of familiar footsteps each evening, even though I knew I would never hear them again. Habit is the most persistent thing, more so than love or hate. But I didn't panic. I let every feeling pass through me like a cloud. Not holding on, not pushing away. My new apartment slowly started to feel like a home. I bought a small wooden table, a green plant for the window, and a warm yellow lamp to make the evenings feel less empty. I wasn't in a hurry to fill the space. I wanted it to take shape slowly, just like how I was learning to live with myself. Every morning, I woke up, made coffee, and watched the city come to life, realizing the heavy feeling in my chest was gone. Work entered its busiest phase yet. Projects that had been delayed were now back on track. A few old partners returned, offering neither apologies nor explanations. I didn't ask. I understood that in this world, resilience is the best answer to all doubt. I signed contracts, attended meetings, and traveled for work. Each trip brought a new feeling, not because of the new scenery, but because I no longer had to report to anyone where I was, what I was doing, or who I was with. One evening, while organizing documents, I received a text from him. A single, short line. "You okay?" I stared at the screen for a long time, feeling no anger, no stirrings. I typed and deleted, typed and deleted. Finally, I replied, "I'm okay." He didn't text back. I didn't either. The conversation ended there, as lightly as if it had never begun. I realized that once all ties are cut, people can treat each other with more kindness, because there is nothing left to fight over. His family no longer contacted me. I wasn't sad. That relationship was built on a title. When the title was gone, silence was natural. My family was different. My mother called often, asking if I was eating well, if I was sleeping enough. She never mentioned the past, never pried. Her silence was more healing than any words of comfort could have been. One afternoon, I ran into her, the woman who had once stood in the middle of my marriage. It wasn't planned, not intentional. She was sitting alone at a coffee shop near my office. When she saw me, she froze for a moment, then stood up. "Elara." "Hi." We sat down. The air wasn't as tense as I would have imagined. "I'm sorry. It's in the past. He and I." "You don't need to say anything." She looked at me, her eyes complex. "You don't hate me?" "I used to. But I'm not holding on to it anymore." She lowered her head. "I left." "That's good. Do you ever have regrets?" I thought for a moment. "About the divorce?" "No. I regret staying for so long." She nodded, as if she understood. We parted in silence. As I walked out of the cafe, I felt very light. Not because I was magnanimous, but because I had traveled far enough not to be pulled back by old stories. The lonely nights were still long sometimes. There were moments of fatigue, moments of doubt, but unlike before, I didn't blame myself for those feelings. I understood that recovery is not a straight line. There are good days and bad days, and all of it is normal. I learned to listen to my body, to rest when I needed to move forward when I had the strength. One evening, I wrote the first lines of a book I had been dreaming of for a long time. Not to complain, not to expose anyone. I just wanted to document the journey of a woman who had been silent for too long and the price she paid to find her voice again. I didn't know if the book would ever be published, but the act of writing was enough to help me understand myself better. I realized that after the old door closed, the world didn't immediately become wider, but it became deeper. I saw everything with different eyes. I was no longer afraid of loss, because I had lost the biggest thing and was still standing. I no longer tried to prove I was okay, because I knew that sometimes I wasn't, and that didn't make me weak. One weekend morning, I woke up early and went for a run around the lake. The sky was clear, the sun was gentle. I saw elderly people exercising, children laughing, couples holding hands. I felt no envy, no alienation. I just felt like I was a part of that picture in my own way, no more and no less. I stopped by the water, watching the ripples on the surface. 2 years ago, I thought that if I left that marriage, my life would fall apart. Now, I stood here, breathing steadily, my heart beating normally, and I knew that what was once called an end was really just a doorway. Stepping through it didn't lead to immediate happiness, but to the freedom to find happiness on my own terms. After that door closed, I didn't become a different person. I simply became myself again. The version that no longer had to endure to stay, no longer had to be silent to keep the peace, and I understood this journey wasn't over. It had only just begun, in a more honest way. 1 year after the divorce, I stood on the balcony of my apartment, watching the city change seasons. The leaves turned color slowly, as if deliberately giving people enough time to get used to the change. I realized I had changed too, not in a dramatic, transformative way, but with a quiet strength that came from within. I no longer counted the days, no longer asked what if. I was simply living, and that was enough. My business had found a stable rhythm. The design studio opened a small second branch, without fanfare, without rushing. I chose a path of sustainable growth, not chasing the spotlight. I understood my value wasn't in proving to anyone that I had won after the divorce. My value lay in my ability to make the right decisions for myself and to take full responsibility for them. Some evenings, I came home very late, so tired I just wanted to turn off the lights and sleep. But unlike before, I no longer felt like I was running from something. I slept well. The sleep of someone who no longer blames themselves is a deep and peaceful sleep. I would wake up, make coffee, open the window, and feel fully present in every moment. I met more people, not to find a new relationship, but to connect. Some admired me, some were curious, some were cautious. I didn't explain my story unless I was asked. I understood that everyone carries their own journey, and no one is obligated to fully understand another's. I also no longer felt the need to recount my pain to be validated. I had already validated myself. Once, during a professional panel, Someone asked me how to get through the most difficult crisis of their life. I thought for a moment and answered truthfully. I didn't get through it. I walked with it until it no longer had the power to define me. The entire room was silent for a few seconds. I knew the answer wasn't eloquent, but it was the truth. No one can leap over pain. You can only walk through it, one step at a time. I no longer had contact with him, not out of animosity, but because it wasn't necessary. We had fulfilled our roles in each other's lives. Occasionally, I heard news of him through mutual friends. He was still working, still successful, but quieter. I didn't compare. I didn't ask questions. I hoped he was okay, in his own way. It was the last kindness I could offer the past. There are days I remember the girl from years ago, the one who sat alone on her wedding night, waiting for someone who never came. I no longer blame her for staying, nor for being silent. She did what she could at that time, and without the her of yesterday, there would be no me of today. I learned to be gentle with myself, even with my weakest versions. I started doing the small things I had once put off, learning to cook a new dish, planting more greenery, running more consistently. These seemingly trivial things became the foundation of a durable happiness. I understood that happiness doesn't come from a single grand event, but from the daily practice of not betraying yourself. One afternoon, I received an email from an early reader of my manuscript. She said my story gave her the courage to consider leaving a relationship that was no longer emotionally safe. I read that email for a long time. I don't advise anyone to get a divorce. I don't encourage leaving at all costs. I simply believe in every person's right to live authentically. If my story helps someone dare to listen to themselves more, that is enough. I understood that life doesn't promise fairness, but it gives everyone a choice. Some choose to stay, some choose to leave. There is no right answer for everyone, only the right answer for each individual at that moment. The important thing is not to trade long-term peace for a false sense of harmony. That evening, I wrote the final lines of this story. I didn't write to close a chapter, but to open one. I wanted the listener, the reader, to reach the last page and see not tragedy, but possibility. The possibility of standing up after falling, of rebuilding from within, of living joyfully and happily in a way that doesn't harm oneself. I put down my pen and looked at the clock. Outside, the city was lighting up. I smiled, not because I had overcome everything, but because I knew that if tomorrow brought new challenges, I would be calm enough to face them. I have learned how to not abandon myself, and that is the most important lesson of all. This story ends here, but life does not. It continues, day by day, in small ways. And I, as the narrator, will stop at this moment, when my heart is quiet enough to look ahead, without rushing, without fear. Dear listeners who have accompanied me until the end of my story, how did you find today's tale? I'm curious about the impression it has left in your hearts and the thoughts it has sparked in you. Please feel free to share your impressions and opinions in the comments. I will carefully read each of them. The likes and subscriptions you give me are the greatest source of strength and motivation for creating better stories in the future. Please don't forget to do so. I sincerely wish that your life is always filled with happiness and good fortune, and that the warm light in your hearts never fades.